Rory Stewart wants to be your Prime Minister. And with an extensive CV that covers the likes of tutoring Prince Harry and Prince William, walking the length of Afghanistan, indeed Brad Pitt owns the rights to his life story, he makes for quite an interesting candidate. So let's find out. Does he stand over the Conservative Party's record of austerity? Would he call a general election? Where does he stand on Brexit? Rory Stewart, thank you very much for taking the time. I'm going to put it to you simply. You're not going to win, are you?
Why do you think I'm not going to win?
My reason for thinking that is you don't have the MPs.
Okay, and why do you think I don't have the MPs?
Because the Conservative Party has become the party of no deal, the party of hard Brexit. You strike me as someone who's conscious, nuanced, and that seems to me to be totally out of sync with the rest of your party.
The reason I believe I can win is that I think Conservative MPs want three things. They want to get Brexit done, they want to beat Jeremy Corbyn, and they want to unify the country. And what we've just discovered today is, particularly with Bercow staying on as Speaker, is that you can't get Brexit done by talking about no deal. That this whole vote was about getting Brexit done. And one of the reasons I'm talking to you on my way up to Warrington and Wigan is that it's really important to remind MPs that the way that we get this done, reunify the country, is by reaching out to non-traditional areas, making sure we get younger voters back, making sure we reassure people. I mean, the Northern Powerhouse concept, for example, is something which we've completely lost. I don't know why. Right? This idea of linking Leeds and Manchester properly, getting the infrastructure and getting the productivity in. And then there are so many other issues we have to talk about, but the way to get there is to be able to communicate with people. And look, I'm not the world's greatest communicator, but I think that my advantage in this race is that I am able to get out into the streets, talk to people, and I'm able to win over voters that maybe some of these other candidates would struggle to get.
I totally agree with you, actually, and we were just talking before we went live that this sort of aspects of the campaign, people are lying low. And one of the things that I think is very admirable is that you're going out and you're speaking to people, you're on the street speaking to regular voters. But at the moment, it's not the regular voters who will be deciding who wins the Conservative leadership contest, is it?
Correct. It's the Conservative MPs. But in the end, Conservative MPs care deeply about regular voters. If I can convince Conservative MPs that the regular voters are going to vote for them under my leadership, then I've won this race.
Do you think it's right that once we get down to those final two candidates, that it'll be around 100,000, 120,000 Conservative Party members who will be deciding the country's next Prime Minister?
I think it's right that a party gets to choose its leader and that leader's Prime Minister, but I think it's a reminder of a bigger thing, which is that we need to build up the Conservative Party again. So one of the reasons that I'm really proud to run for this, and a central part of what I want to do, is that I believe I can bring an enormous number of younger people into the Conservative Party. And people thought 3-4 years ago it couldn't be done, that political parties were dead. And then Jeremy Corbyn has managed to quadruple the number of people in the Labour Party. Of course we can do the same in the Conservative Party. We can become a great mass membership party again. But in order to do that, we've got to get out. We've got to talk to people who we haven't been talking to.
This is a slight repetition of my previous point, but it seems like that approach and that politics is slightly out of sync with the rest of your party. To see, when I say that, I'm thinking of people like Mark Francois, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Nadine Dorries, who sort of have this close your eyes and jump, have faith in the country type approach. And that seems to be cognitively dissonant with what you're saying.
Well, I think we need to be practical, and actually Conservative associations are very practical. If you say to them, look, this story, believe in the country, doesn't work. I mean, the analogy I was trying to think of is that I was trying recently to stuff 3 bin bags into a small bin. And my wife said, you're never going to be able to fit these things in, right? And I thought, what would it mean to turn around and say, believe in the bin, right? She's like, no, it just doesn't fit. The same with believe in Britain. Believing in Britain, optimism starts with reality. So optimism about our car industry, about selling 300 million electric cars into Europe, which is what I'd like to do over the next few decades, begins with a trade deal with zero tariffs, zero quotas to the European market. Transforming social care begins with an economy that works, and an economy that works begins with getting our trading relationships right. So I'm in favour of Brexit, but I'm in favour of a trade deal. I think a no-deal Brexit is a recipe for delay and uncertainty, which is the last thing anybody wants in this country.
Let's say we did end up pursuing that no-deal scenario. I feel like it's slightly disingenuous to say that because at some point we would presumably do some kind of trade deal with Europe. It's almost as if no deal is almost like a holding pattern. Would you agree with that?
A very long holding pattern. I mean, imagine you go into no deal and you sit there on the worst possible terms. WTO terms, by definition, the worst possible trading terms you can have in the world. It's the terms that Afghanistan has been trading on, right? You sit there and from a position of weakness, you try to negotiate a new trade deal. And what would Europe say? Europe would say, fine, we have a trade deal with us, pay us our £39 billion, guarantee the citizens' rights, sort out the Irish border, you can have a trade deal. The danger is you would spend 4 or 5 years banging your head against a brick wall and end up with exactly the deal we've been offered at the moment. And what on earth would be the point of that? When we can take advantage of a trade deal to grow our economy. If we can land this by October, there will be a surge of investment in this country. Land no deal, and I'm afraid we're going in a very different situation.
Some people will respond and say that no deal trading on WTO terms will actually reduce the prices for consumers, reduce things like the price of milk in shops, the price of bread. Is that a fair point, do you think? Would you agree with their analysis?
If that's what they're going to do, they're not being honest about what they want to do on their tariffs and quotas. So yes, there are some people who want to go for a no deal, which is complete zero tariffs to the world. You would get cheaper milk, but the milk wouldn't be made in Britain. It would be coming in from other countries. You'd get cheaper beef, it would be coming from Argentina. You'd get cheaper wheat, it would be coming from the United States. And in fact, you would be wiping out your agricultural industry. You could do the same with the car industry, right? You could bring in cars, zero tariff from China. You'd wipe out your automotive industry because you would be facing 40 to 60% tariffs exporting your agricultural products into Europe and taking everything. And this is the other thing that people aren't pointing out with WTO rules. WTO rules are even for the whole world. If you go zero tariff for cheap milk to the United States, you have to do that with Europe too, while they put up a barrier against you. So you can do that if you want to essentially do what some of the economists on the ERG want to do, which is wipe out our car industry.
Serious words you're throwing around there.
Patrick Minford, I mean, and this, it sounds like this is just words. Patrick Minford, who is the main economist arguing for the no deal camp, testified to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee when I was on it, on camera, saying he's prepared to let the British car industry go. It's going to be like the loss of the coal industry in the early 1980s, and we're just going to put some regeneration projects in. That must be understood, because I promise you, the majority of people in this country are not signed up to that. That vision is not democratic, it's not patriotic, and I'm not allowing people to say no deal is the patriotic democratic option. It is not.
I'd counter you there by saying that the European election's just gone. For the pros and cons of it, I think significant cons. The Brexit Party campaigned without a manifesto. Indeed, their only real pledge was that they would campaign for take us out on a no deal, and they secured millions of votes.
They did very well. But I guarantee you there is not a majority mandate in this country for no deal. I'm a Democrat. I respected that referendum. That's why I'm backing Brexit, because the majority of people voted for it. The majority of people in this country do not want no deal. If you try to ram no deal down their throats when they don't want it, you're not going to get anything stable. The next government that comes in will just reverse it immediately. We need a deal that works for the next 40 years for Britain and Europe. We're not going to get this from this kind of chat.
How would you go about getting a mandate for that then? Would you call a general election?
No, I would absolutely rule out a general election. In the end, there's no secret to this. There's no magic bullet. We live in a parliamentary democracy. The only way of doing this is through Parliament. And I'm somebody who can negotiate. I'm somebody who can communicate. I'm on my way to Wigan. One of the reasons I'm going to Wigan is Lisa Nandy comes from Wigan. She's a moderate Labour MP who wanted to vote for this deal. Why did we not get her voting for this deal? Because we can't listen. We can't communicate. We need a completely new generation of politics. We need to get this done.
I'll come to your negotiation skills in a moment and your time in Iraq. But I think you were probably, I would say, the most reliable defender of Theresa May's deal. It seemed like daily you were going out to bat and defend it. Would you delay Brexit? What would your approach be? Is your approach, this is the deal, we're going to bring it through? How are you going to resolve the parliamentary deadlock around it?
I would start with the Citizens' Assembly. In other words, I would start by setting up a body to take it out of Parliament. It would be like a giant jury. People selected from up and down the United Kingdom. Right? These are people from every walk of life, women, men, every different background. They would take expert testimony on Brexit in public, so the entire public would see the details. There are people still in the House of Commons who do not know the difference between a customs union and a single market. And that means that there are probably millions of people in this country who do not fully understand the difference between a customs union and a single market. We've got to have a serious discussion about this. I trust people. Promise you, if you put 99 people in a room, give them a chance to talk about this, they can resolve this. And the reason why is it's been done. It was done in Ireland in the abortion debate. The abortion debate, like Brexit, very polarized, very black and white. It unlocked it because it got out of the top level down into the details of this.
That ties into your approach about compromise and discussion, because Progress in the Labour Party are advocating something very similar. Is it something that you've spoken to them about as well?
Yes. I believe in talking to everybody. Right, I had dinner with Nigel Farage recently. I've just been speaking to Len McCluskey, talking to Stella Creasy, getting in touch with Lisa Nandy. I mean, I believe in talking to everyone. The way, it doesn't matter what you're negotiating in life. It's not about red lines. It's about listening, acting, being nimble, and we can get this cracked. What people want is Brexit done. This is the massive misunderstanding of some of my colleagues of what happened in those Euro elections. 70% of the people voting for Nigel Farage are not voting for him because they don't like Theresa May's deal. They're voting for him because they want to get this done. And there's a massive upside down contradiction in this. The very people who are stopping Brexit getting done are trying to use people's impatience with Brexit to deliver a no deal, which will just lead to more delays.
What did you talk to Nigel about when you had dinner with him?
We actually were before a huge debate at the Oxford Union, and what I was teasing him about is the fact that actually he often sounds like an extreme Remainer. Both he and the extreme Remainers talk the same language, and it's not a language about Parliament. It's often a language, in his case, about attacking the BBC, so he calls it the Brussels Broadcasting Corporation. The Remainers call it the Brexit Broadcasting Corporation. They both try to call people like me an appeaser. They try to use language about Churchill and the Second World War. What they need to focus on is the practicalities of getting this done. We need to get on with it, get on with it. It's just if I was lucky enough to be Prime Minister, that's the only slogan for government I would put up on every desk in every department. Get on with it.
Just get on with it. So we're talking about compromise here. You've said you wouldn't serve under Boris Johnson if he was to be elected as leader. How do you reconcile those two things? Can you say that that's a fair approach to compromise?
Well, I have to say that if I was offered the job of, I'm the International Development Secretary, so I was offered the job of Foreign Secretary, International Development Secretary, any cabinet job under somebody that was arguing for a policy that I believe can't work, I can't advocate for that. That's not a personal criticism. It's not about division in the party. But if people are asking me to advocate for something I don't believe in, it doesn't make sense.
So what about Dominic, Raab, Esther McVeigh?
It doesn't matter who the person is, it's the principle. Somebody is advocating for a policy that you think is going to be damaging and catastrophic. I'm not doing them a favor, I'm not doing myself a favor, I'm not doing the public a favor by pretending I believe something I don't believe.
Let's go to Iraq. You're the governor of a region in the country there, involved in some pretty dicey negotiations. Ideal experience, bit of sectarian violence coming into the Brexit negotiations now?
Well, it's obviously 100% different, because when I was in Iraq, I had 110 mortars and rocket-propelled grenades coming into my compound. I was up on a roof with people with heavy machine guns. I was dealing with thousands of people demonstrating in the streets. It's a war. It's just after a war. But there is one similarity, which is what I learned there, is firstly that you've got to get out and meet people. So to take an example from Iraq, when there's 1,000 people demonstrating at your gate, the temptation is for your bodyguard team to say, stay inside the building. I realized that you have to step out. You've got to go to that gate, step outside, meet the crowd, meet them, pull them in. You've got to believe that you can listen to them and convert them. It's the only way of getting this done. Let me, though, if I can, just take one moment to talk about the policy issue that I think is not being talked about in this campaign at all, which is that in pushing to get young voters on side, we're forgetting the fact that probably the biggest scandal in British life ultimately is the way that we're looking after the elderly. And the biggest crisis that we're going to face over the next 20, 30 years is a crisis of the elderly. We do not have a social care system that works. It was the big uncompleted revolution of the welfare state. We set up a great national health service. We do not have proper social care for the elderly. We've got in my constituency 88-year-old women looking after 93-year-old doubly incontinent men. and they're getting older all the time. It's not like mine changing the nappy of my 2-year-old, right? I'm still young, and he's going to not need a nappy quite soon, I hope. Anyway, we need to deal with this. We need to get a national conversation going on this. And one of the reasons why you want a leader, I believe, who can speak to Labour and who can speak to young people is that the only way of solving what is probably the biggest and most expensive challenge in British public life is by making that a national conversation. And we learnt that in the 2017 election. Try to make this a Tory issue, we're never going to reform it. Make it a national issue, we can actually probably do the most important moral and social change this country needs.
So do you stand over your party's austerity programme then?
I think the time has gone to move beyond cuts. I think our public finances are now in a good position. I would be putting more money into schools, but, and this relates also to why I'm against the no-deal Brexit, we have to reassure investors in the world that this is a sensible country, that we're safe with our money, we're responsible in managing our finances, that we do not make unfunded commitments. Otherwise, why on earth would somebody not vote for Jeremy Corbyn? And the same applies to a no-deal Brexit. I don't care that these guys who are running against me are talking about cutting tax or spending. If they deliver a no-deal Brexit, the impact on our economy will completely outweigh any of these other minor moves they're making on tax and spending. We've got to have a reputation for competence, we've got to have a reputation for safety, and that's what allows us to issue green bonds to build 2 million more houses. That's what allows us to sort out our social care system. Not little tricks. Avoiding a no-deal Brexit, getting a good Brexit done, getting the investment in, and being careful with the way we spend our money.
One last question. What's the naughtiest thing you've ever done?
I keep being asked this question. I don't have a really good answer to this. My mother suggested yesterday that she watched me when I was a 9-year-old. I'd just been watching reading a Tintin book, sit on a cactus. And she then had to spend the next, I think, hour and a half picking things out of the bottom of this 9-year-old's bum. So that was her suggestion anyway. Thank you very much.
Cheers,
Lovely
Rory.
to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you again.